Hi, my name's Andrea Cannon. I'm a guitarist and I live in Houston, Texas. I have my own studio and I also teach the jazz guitarists at Dekaney High School in Spring ISD. I was at Lone Star College for a while teaching, and I worked for 15 years with Berklee College of Music as a regional admissions alumni representative. And one reason I mentioned that is because we're going to be talking about learning these jazz etudes. And I had a time in my life where I decided I wanted to study some classical guitar as well, just to kind of get the gist of what they do, the way they say it, you know, not just what I think. And in that process, I had this experience. I had been listening to one of my Joe Pass recordings and marveling at this particular run that he played in the middle of a beautiful ballad, just this flowing cascade of notes leading to the next chord, and thinking about how that was all improvised. And in my classical lessons, one of the teachers told a story about Manuel Barahueco, who's a great classical guitarist, and that he was the teacher says he left to go to lunch, and Manuel was sitting in a practice room practicing moving between these two chords. And when he came back from lunch, he looked in the studio and Manuel was still practicing the changing between the two chords. So, you know, are we just able to flowingly cascade and play notes because we practice scales and chords? Or do we have to sit and practice everything meticulously and carefully and know exactly even which spot on our finger we're going to use or whatever? And I say for us, we have to draw from both, that it's a balance. And so with that, I will share, these are overall guidelines for all of the etudes, and that is, I use a 3-step process: acquisition, fluency, and artistry. So acquisition is just learning the notes. It's getting the notes under your fingers so you can play them without mistakes. Fluency is going through the acquisition process to the point where you can get smoother and smoother with the chords and be able to increase your tempo till you're at performance tempo. And artistry is just a lot of little details, and we don't want to miss them, but sometimes we do. So that's why we're going to talk about it. So that's my overall for all of the notes, for all of the etudes. So we're going to talk now about Etude 1, realizing that some of these points will directly be included for other etudes as well. So Etude 1, it's a swing etude, which means we've got swing eighths. And so there's a lot of chord changes. So I suggest right off that for all of the etudes, you learn the chord changes and play through them like you're just playing rhythm guitar. And then you can take it further if you want. You can record the chords. You can practice a bass line with the chords. You can take your recording and practice arpeggios over that, so you start to get more of a feel for the harmony, and you can play scales. So all of that could be done with all of the etudes. But for this one in particular, for Etude 1, I really think you need to play the chords and just kind of get a feel for how they flow. All right. Now, always have a pencil ready, because it's important as you're working your way through from note to note, you make note of anything that you might need to remember, like there's a shift here. Well, which note are you shifting on? Can you say which note you're shifting exactly? So that will help you as you learn, because sometimes if you don't write things down, you come back the next day and go, I don't even remember playing that phrase, but you know you did. So any notes that are going to make it easier and help your memory along is going to save you time in the end. So your first goal is to be able to play the notes, to get from one note to the next, to the next, to the next, until you've played the whole page without error and without any big pauses. So you're not using a metronome in the first acquisition stage. You're just learning your roadmap through the tune, okay? Now, when you are smooth enough to be able to get from the beginning to the end, playing all the right notes, now you pick a slow metronome tempo. And I like to say, make it painfully slow. So if you would ask me how slow is painfully slow, I would say, does it hurt? If not, make it slower. Okay, because the idea is you're training your fingers and your mind for success. You are learning the right moves, because your fingers will memorize wrong moves too. So if you're going too quickly and you make the same mistake, and you say, oh, I make that mistake all the time. Guess what? You're going to play it like that. So painfully slow. When you can get through the entire thing painfully slow, then you increase the tempo a little bit and continue to make notes, because sometimes things change when you get it at a faster tempo. I have a case in point for you in Etude 3 on that. So when you come back tomorrow, look at the tempo you ended with. I suggest you write them all down as you increase. And not just because you increase it and you play it a little bit, but you increase the tempo and then you play with it until you get through with it. You get through it with no errors. Then that's the tempo that you hope work a lot at that tempo, hopefully. And then, so the next day when you come back, you see what your final tempo was that you practiced at, and you're going to go back to a slower tempo because you're not warmed up, and it gets your mind back on the piece and all that. And as a last point on Etude 1, I'd like to talk about the last chord. It's an F major 7 sharp 11, which means it has an F, E, C, E, and a B. That's a sharp 11. So, and he has voiced it very low, an F and a B and an E. So it needs to be handled carefully. So if we do the last measure, let's see. And we play it too loud. Yeah, it gives the effect that maybe we were walking down the street and somebody moving a grand piano from an apartment dropped it on the sidewalk. So we don't want that, no. So let's see if we can do it as gently as possible. And I think that's the way to handle that. That's a point of artistry. There's no dynamic markings throughout the piece, and nowhere it says forte, piano, or anything like that. So I'm just going to say on that last chord, handle it very lightly. Now to talk about the items particular to Etude 2, this is a chord melody. The chords are beautiful. The tempo is indicated at 60. I don't think you need to practice this with your metronome because of the instruction to play lyrically. So when you think of lyrics, you think of words, right? So the melody is the most important thing here. Of course, the chords are supportive of that and help give it its beauty, but if the melody is broken up because it's hard for you to reach a chord, that really breaks up the whole direction of the piece. So with this one, and this is the only one that really has this kind of, you have to take the approach of playing the melody separately. And in fact, I'm going to tell you, you should be able to sing the melody. So you want to write words to it, you could do that. But la 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 or is just fine. Okay, so for instance, let's say you have a hard time getting from your B Okay, we don't want to hear a big break like that in between chords. So you're going to have to do the little bit of the Arawago. Meticulous planning to make sure your fingers know where to go for the next chord so the melody doesn't get broken up. And that's the most important thing with this one. You do have some big chords that are a little unconventional, and then you also have some chords that are familiar to you that you probably play every day. So Etude 2, play the melody first, sing it, hum it, make sure it's internalized, repeat pairs of chords as you go. And then I wanted to tell you one little story here, and that is there was a movie in the 70s, I think, called The Deer Hunter. Never seen the movie, but I've heard the song because it's played with a solo guitar, the theme song. And the film composer gave the song to John Williams, the famous Australian guitarist, not the Star Wars guy. And when he wrote the arrangement, there's a note at the bottom of it that says, it's may not be possible to play this exactly as it is written, but it has been written that way to convey the feeling of legato to be aimed at. So I would say the same thing about this. You've got these chords, and if you just look at the chord, you go, man, that's hard, it's clunky, how am I going to do that? And then I have to go here. But keep that melody in your mind and keep the feeling of legato to be aimed at in your mind, and then it'll be as perfect as you can make it, and that's what we want. All right. And now for Etude 3. This one is a similar tempo as Etude 1. It's straight eighths, and there's far fewer chords because it's modal. So it has a different type sound to it. There's a lot of fourths in the melody. And there's some rhythmic tricks with chords built in fourths. And so in order to get these rhythms, I like the concept. I learned a lot about rhythms when I studied the book Melodic Rhythms for Guitar. That's by William Levitt. And it's part of the Berkeley series. And his concept is this from down on downbeats and up on upbeats, and that this will help you learn difficult rhythms. So if you have something tied across the bar, you would still raise the pick or lower the pick, but you just wouldn't hit the string. So that way your hand goes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and no matter what. So I want to talk about that in terms of this rhythm at measure 25. It's let's see. Okay, now if we use Bill's approach, then we're going to go down on the downbeats, up on the upbeats. So it's going to be kind of making it hard, because I decided, and this is a point of artistry, to do all down picks. Now I use the down up method to help me with the rhythm, especially in the next line. But after I learned the rhythm, I thought the piece is kind of aggressive. It's kind of an aggressive tune, and so I liked I liked all down picks for it. So that's a point of artistry. You know, you want it to sound more fitting with the rest of the tune, so you do the picking. That's not the educational picking you're using to learn how to count, but it's the for the style. And another thing about this piece is slurs. And well, before I leave this topic, palm muting. Because there's so many there's eighth rests written in between a lot of these chords, so it just takes care of it. And you have to mute it anyway. So there's two ways you can mute. You can either palm mute, or you can do it by pulsing your finger. So just make sure that you do it, because that gives you the punches, the rhythmic punch that helps drive this piece. Okay, and one last thing is slurs. There's nothing indicated anywhere in any of these etudes about when to slur, but there were some places. I did a lot of it actually, and that doesn't mean that you have to. That's the artistry thing. But one place that I was working, and it involves slurs, but it's also to the point that I made earlier, where when you're working on your fingerings in the very beginning, you may come up with a fingering that works great, but then when it's at a faster tempo, it doesn't work so great. And here's a case in point in measure 15. So at first I was playing it with all my second finger, but after it got a little bit faster, you can even just leave your finger down. So that was a fingering that changed the more I studied the piece. And this song also ends on a kind of a cool chord with 3 fretted notes, the D, G, and B, and then, I'm sorry, it's a D, G, and C, and B and E are left open, and he indicates that too. And so I hope that this is going to help you find your way through all 3 of these etudes. I had a lot of fun playing them, and I hope you do too. Work hard, but also have some fun with it.